welcome everybody to, there we are, I knew the recording would come on by magic. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Powys Service Board, Public Service Board. Our first item on the agenda is welcome. I don't have an extensive script to that, but I just do warmly welcome you today. You'll see, I think, from the annual report that appears later in the agenda and the introduction to that by myself as chair. I indicated that during my period office I would try and inject a little bit of energy and enthusiasm into this role. So don't be surprised, as I did last time, and I'll be pulling you in and encouraging you to participate. There's no hiding in the shadows with the PSB anymore. So a warm welcome today. And Connor, can we have apologies, please? I understand that there are a few today.
Yes, of course, Chair. We've received apologies from Emma Palmer, Chief Executive at Powys County Council, and also Diane Reynolds, Director of Economic Development and Growth, and also Jane Thomas, Director of Corporate Services, and Felicity Llewellyn from Powys County Council. Then Claire Swales, Chief Executive at PABO, Alison Perry from Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, Hayley Thomas, Chief Executive, Powys Teaching Health Board, and we've also received apologies from Christine Harley from the Prisons and Probation Service, and they are all of the apologies that I've had, Chair.
Well, thank you very much. I'll just go to the floor. Are there any more apologies that those with us wish to give on behalf of anyone else, or to indicate you're a substitute? So I've got Anne Watkin.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to advise that it's apologies from Duncan Hamer, but I'm here in his stead. Thank you.
Excellent, and you're most welcome as a substitute, Anne, today. And obviously the enthusiastic and energetic meeting last time has clearly scared a few people away, but do stick with it. I'm sure it will get better. And that sort of joke aside, I know some people are sunning themselves on beaches and others are hard at work elsewhere, but we do have a quorum today, so we are able to continue as a fully functioning board. And I won't waste any more of your time, and we'll take us instead to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 15th of July. You will have had the minutes circulated already and an opportunity to read them, test them, and I'm looking for someone to confirm that they're happy to accept them as a true record. So is anyone prepared to do that was here last time? Yeah, so I've got Gavin and I've Got Meredith seconding that as well. So we've got a proposer and a seconder, and I'll just ask for a quick show of hands that we can accept those. Yeah, okay, jolly good. Thank you very much. And we now then turn to the standing items. So we have three substantive standing items, and Catherine, you're up first with your brief update on where we are at the moment with evidence and insight. And that's pages 13 to 16 of the pack.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of evidence and insight then, so this is the update for Q2, so 1st of July to the end of this month, which we're nearly there. So the step continues to progress well. So during Q2, we did have the launch of the online hub being slightly delayed due to some timing that we were making sure that it sort of coincided with in terms of the climate element. So the team have been focusing on recently the preparation for not only the wellbeing assessment, but the population needs assessment as well, which are both due at the same time. So due to be published in March 2027, which sounds like quite a long way away, but they're quite chunky tasks. So there are some cross-cutting sort of aspects to both those assessments, and there is some potential to integrate some of our processes and reduce duplication. So that is something that they have been working on and will continue to work on. And also there's a plea to you all really just to identify those within your own organisations that work within sort of data, etc., to sort of put them forward if they're not already forward, so that we do know who those key people are that will help us to pull that information together. So if you could let either myself or Connor know, that would be really great. Some of the next steps that we've got coming up then are to identify who those people would be, launch that hub, and so that we've got a better and more effective way of communicating with the public and our communities. Have a mechanism to enable to get some ideas through and to test those to help with some of the work that we're doing, as well as sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold going on. Connor, could you give us a little bit of an update, please, on what we have actually done in terms of the milestones? I know that you are in it more than myself.
No, of course. Yes, in terms of those milestones then that we've included in the STEP progress update, the first one there around PSB partners sharing engagement findings and insight in a more coordinated manner. We determined that that's remaining on track. It's sort of a key element of that has been the Powys Engagement and Insight Network, which sort of brings together officers from across the PSB and RPB organisations, and I think that's sort of working quite well. We have monthly meetings, and then we use that as sort of as part of, sort of collating all of that engagement insight that's been undertaken across partnerships, and then that's then fed into those 6 monthly engagement and insight reports. So we determined that that's probably still on track and not necessarily complete at this stage, because it's it's about sort of bringing those processes back into sort of more business as usual. So that's ongoing. And then in terms of milestone 2, we've sort of considered this to be complete now because, again, mainly due to the 6 monthly engagement insight report. But then again, there'll need to be more that comes out of that engagement network. So that will be an ongoing piece of work. And then in terms of milestone 3, in terms of establishing that mechanism so that people have a regular opportunity to have their say and then can actually influence sort of decision making via the PSB or through other organisations. We put that as off track because we've taken some time to sort of focus more on sort of milestones, particularly milestone 5 and milestone 4 in preparation for the next sort of iteration of the population needs assessment and wellbeing assessment, because that will be, as Catherine said before, quite a large piece of work and will involve needs to involve a range of partners from both the PSB and RPB to sort of achieve that ambition of sort of, I guess, integrating those processes as much as possible, so there is limited duplication there, because they're quite similar reports but just focus in different areas. And then we're hoping to use that PSB hub on the Have Your Say Powys website then, and then to sort of launch that in conjunction with the climate hub that's also planned, because we can see that sort of being one and the same as part of one sort of wider PSB hub, and that would be both for publishing sort of information about the board, in terms of minutes, the governance, meeting recordings, but then also linking to our other sort of resources like the Wellbeing Information Bank that's currently hosted on the council's website. And then also have sort of that would be the type of place where we'd have those sort of engagement tools or surveys that we can use then to try and capture that insight from people and trying to sort of create a bit more of a two-way conversation, that we can use that. So otherwise we'd need to rely on in-person engagement, which can be quite difficult, obviously, because of the geography of Powys. And then the last step then, the last 2 steps around the data network. So that's now nearly launching, and we're preparing invitations to send out. But then, as Catherine sort of mentioned before, we're looking as well for sort of people from across the PSB and equally the RPB organisations, sort of who are those key data officers, because we'd like them to be involved in this process when we're looking at sort of what our data needs are, what were the gaps from the last wellbeing and population needs assessments. And then the 5th milestone there is around looking where we can maybe utilise some support from Public Health Wales as part of the Shaping Places for Wellbeing program, which sort of uses systems thinking techniques, and it's focused at PSBs, but we thought that there may be some scope to do some work there around sort of that integration of the population needs assessment and wellbeing assessment. So that's what we've been up to over the past quarter.
Thank you very much. And Catherine, does that conclude the presentation with the supplement from Connor there? So thank you for that. Now I see there's been an active dialogue in the chat box, which is really helpful about chasing down who the reps are, which was part of your request. And I just wanted to add that just before the meeting, I was asking whether or not it would be at all possible to show a link across to the new PSB hub, and what we've agreed is that we will add that to the agenda in December and have a bit of an unwrapping of that there, because hopefully we'll be able to, because of the work that it's doing in showcasing engagement activity as well, be able to showcase a little bit of that. So if that can be arranged, Connor, Catherine, I think that'll be really useful just to give us a flavour of that at the time. And I'm looking at Liz on here as well. If we've got the Climate Hub, perhaps we might as well have a dip into that as well if it's available by the December meeting. Okay, are there any questions of Catherine or Connor on this? Yeah, I've got another one from Meredith.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine, Connor, really helpful. So my question in relations to in the action plan, there's a risk there around data sharing agreements and reference to MOU on data sharing between partners being sort of prepared, etc. Can I just ask, there's one then on amber and then one was on green. I just wanted sort of clarity. Have you got data sharing agreements in place across organisations? Element really, because it just doesn't just relate also to the needs assessment element, it relates to actually how people work on a day-to-day basis, isn't it, really, as well? So it'd be just helpful to have an update on that. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, Connor, did you? But yes, no, we do have data sharing agreements in place, Mez. They are there, but it's just making sure that we sort of review them and make sure that they're still appropriate and nothing's changed, because obviously additional people have joined. So yeah, it's just something that we're looking at. But Connor, I don't know if you wanted to add any more.
I think the only thing to add was just that at the moment it is more of a memorandum of understanding that was put together because the advice that was sort of sought and received suggested that at the moment, because the type of data that we're especially in the work of the PSB that we're shown doesn't usually relate to personal data, that we can carry on with that memorandum of understanding. But again, then if that developed then and it turned into sort of more sharing of information that could be personally identifiable, say, then we would need to go down the route of establishing more formal data sharing agreements, which would require some more work and would require sort of more in-depth involvement from partners, and then obviously approval from their data protection officers. So at the moment, because we're focusing usually on sharing data that's either open source or would be if it was, say, a request under the Freedom of Information Act was made. So at the moment, in our opinion, we're okay with the current agreements we've got, but we think it is worth reviewing as well, just as we in readiness for this next sort of iteration of the population needs assessment and wellbeing assessment, because there could be some potentially identified information maybe around sort of social care, but again, I think that would be quite minimal, but we'll look into that just to make sure that we're completely covered.
Thanks, Connor. But just to be clear, I think we do have social care and Powys Teaching Health Board data sharing agreements, which will cover that confidential personal data that you're talking about. I'm pretty sure, Catherine, they're in place already. It's just not owned by the PSB.
Yes, and I was just about to add as well. So obviously we've got our wellbeing information bank, don't we? Which is there, and the majority of the time the data officers from each sort of relevant organisation would usually aggregate the data so that by the point it comes to sort of being shared, it's at a sort of locality level anyway. So it's never really, so it's not normally, we're not normally sharing raw data. It's normally at a more aggregated level where it's at a Powys level or a locality, whatever we're looking at.
So good question, and I think we'll find there's multiple answers depending on what we're looking at there. And I see Connor's put some information on the information bank, wellbeing information bank, in the chat. Okay, if there's nothing more on 3.1, we'll move on to 3.2, and that's you, Liz, to give us an update on where we're at with the our response to the climate emergency.
Fernanda, Powell, I will share my screen. I've got a little presentation for you.
Yeah, carry on when you're ready.
Yep, great. From the beginning. Okay, so this is based on the quarterly report. Oh, I've come on the wrong setting there. So this is the report that you should have. I've just removed your faces from my screen, so shout if you want to catch my attention. So this is the overview. We are in kind of phase 2 of this Powys PSB climate work. Phase 1 was looking at really understanding the carbon footprint of Powys, the opportunities for carbon sequestration and storage through kind of natural processes across our landscape, and looking at some of the climate risks. Phase 2 is deepening our understanding of climate risks, and we've actually started working with local partnerships, which are providing really fantastic support to us, and we'll come on to that in a minute. And phase 2 is also about sharing a lot of the evidence and analysis that we gathered in phase 1 and developing our approach to stakeholder involvement, and also setting up some ways of working and developing ways of working so that we can have a really genuinely integrated approach to climate action across the county. So we've made quite a lot of progress on that, and you'll see that most things are on track, and the thing that's off track is continued funding for this work beyond this quarter. So I'll just give you some highlights of where we're at. I'm clicking, my screen is not moving. There we go. So the first thing just to draw your attention to is a large climate and nature event that we're organising on the 15th of November. And the idea is to bring together town and community councillors, social enterprises, community groups, local businesses, but also just active citizens, to have a conversation about all the big systems change shifts that are needed across the county, and how everyone can be involved in their huge range of different ways in contributing to those shifts. So the idea is that if people have a sense of that there isn't an overview about what's needed, and they feel that there is momentum and action is happening, and they've got some insights into that, but also that they can be signposted to and have conversations with experts in a range of fields. So that event is about to go live, and we're just setting up finalising the event right now. Chloe's on the call, and want to say thank you very much to Boyd Powys Food Partnership, who are going to provide the food and refreshments for the event, because we thought it was very important that we have a kind of a sustainable event and have the opportunity to talk about food, because it's at the heart of a lot of the systems changes that are needed. So the next item is the Powys Climate Hub that we've just been talking about, and we are really seeking to have an integrated approach, as was described, with the other elements of the kind of have your say hub. We want to share all this information that we've been gathering and analysis in a way that's accessible to quite a wide range of people, stakeholders with different specific interests, but also local communities. We want to signpost people to local and national resources, and we want to showcase Powys climate action across sectors. We're also investigating having an organising space in the portal to try and create an opportunity for more in-depth community of practice to develop. What we're not going to do is duplicate either national resources that already exist, or sector-specific resources, or information that's on the Powys Action on the Climate Emergency website. But I think it is really important that the public sector has somewhere where we can arrange our information in a kind of systematic and clear way, so that we can be an authoritative voice on climate, but also to give confidence to the public that we are taking this issue seriously. So yeah, and let's visit that in depth in the next meeting. And we've got a really great consultant on board now to help us with the climate comms associated with that, so that will be a foundational piece of communications work that we will then be able to draw on across different platforms in future if we want to. Then climate stakeholders. I welcome these meetings with more energy, because I hope that these can be forums not just for scrutiny of our work, but actually to help put our minds together to work out what needs to happen next. And it's really important that we have active engagement from the top of the PSB organisations, as well as we've got a very active and well-functioning climate working group. One of the things we've been wrestling with is we now have a really rich bank really of climate stakeholders who we've been working with, who we reach out to on kind of individual basis. And a lot of those people we want to bring together at the event on the 15th of November. We also have a climate stakeholder group that has been somewhat functioning over the last couple of years, but in truth isn't very representative of the people of Powys in all sorts of different ways. And what I really want to understand from you as kind of senior leaders of these organisations is there a need to have a kind of a reference group of people across Powys that is representative, but also informed about climate change, in order to inform public body policy and plan development? So there is a sort of a people can just sign up to be advisors to Powys County Council and so on at a general level, but do you need a more informed layer of people on tap, so that if you're developing a policy or a major plan, that you have people that you can reach out to? If that was the case, we'd need a bit of a forward planner of what those decisions or ideas generation are that's needed. And the thinking behind this is the involvement principle of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And what we want to avoid is a situation where we, fully bake all of our ideas and then, just kind of consult at the last minute and hope that things are rubber stamped. Actually, we want to make sure that the right voices are involved at the right time, but we're still figuring out how best to do that in relation to climate change and public bodies. I think what there isn't an appetite for is another layer of people who will be there to scrutinise and hold public bodies to account, because there are already systems set up to do that. So that's something perhaps we could come back to at the end. The fourth thing is a set of climate risk workshops. So this is building on work in phase 1, and this is really about sharing the analysis that we've conducted so far. And Melusi's on the call, who's led a lot of this work, where we've gathered a lot of information and analysed it in relation to the climate change committees, CCRA, climate change risk assessment 3, and then it changed to form sort of categories that they ask us to look at. So a lot of analysis has happened, and we want to share that with you as the senior leaders in the PSB, but also with a nominated layer of officers across your organisation. Who is it that needs to really understand what the main climate risks are to the county? And then we need to have a facilitated process of really understanding risk ownership across the different organisations, and how we're going to work together in place to make sure that we manage risk and become more resilient, And I think this needs to happen in a number of ways. It needs to happen, you know, sectors, the transport sector or whatever, in place, in locations. But also we need to look at not just individual climate impacts, but cascading impacts. And so the proposal is this set of 4 events, all facilitated by local partnerships, all building on the work that we've done so far, to get us to that next stage where we're understanding, we've all got a shared understanding of the most important risks, that we start to think about who are the kind of lead owners of those risks, and then we start to think about how do we develop action plans and ways of working so that we're actively becoming more resilient as a county. The 4th thing. 5th is this measuring, evaluation, accountability and learning. At the moment, we're developing our understanding about climate change, what's happening to the county of Powys, but what we really need to also understand is what are the most important ways in which the public sector can play a role in leading, catalysing and enabling a really big scale up of climate action across the county. And this onion diagram is one developed and used by the Climate Change Committee and one that we've adopted. And we are developing a sort of framework for public body action locally that looks at these kind of A to G ways in which public bodies can play that wider role in society, and looking at across the transformational shifts that we've identified, that we've shared in previous documents around energy, transport, food, resource use, etc. And so we've made a bid to the Welsh Local Government Association for some funding that they are looking to support strategic projects on climate change. And the idea is that we would be looking to work with a cross-section of public administration, so the Corporate Joint Committee, PSB, local authority, other public bodies, and working out how do we have a more coordinated, systematic approach, and how do we build in this kind of monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, so that we're not just doing ad hoc climate action, but we're doing it in a coordinated way. Last couple of things. Social enterprises, as part of the funding that we've got from Shared Prosperity Fund, we're looking to support the scaling up of a couple of social enterprises. We're in discussions, been in discussions about the Hive and the immediate need to protect its short-term future, but also how do we think much bigger about this, and how do we have something that's a bit like the Hive in every market town in Powys. So ongoing discussions about that. And then just the last slide. So this is the one that's kind of off track, in the sense that we've had phase 1. Phase 2 is all on track in terms of delivery. At the moment, there's a cliff edge of the funding at the end of February. And we think that really the value of what we have been doing is capacity building. And the fruits of what we have done will be actually kind of much strengthened if we're able to carry on for longer, and if the PSB sort of senior leadership sees the value in coordinated climate work and carrying on. So we really need to start the conversation now about funding for a next phase, if we're going to kind of keep the staff group in place and you know, continue to the end of this period of work. So I'm going to stop sharing now. That is an overview of the climate work.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you've raised the point about funding risk, and hopefully we can return to that in a moment. I've got a couple of questions for you, Liz, if that's okay. You asked a question of us about layering consultation, or consultation bodies being available. Whilst I've not been as close to this recently as I once was, when we were looking at it before, we had organisations like PACE, Powys Action Against the Climate Emergency, or whatever PACE is. So there are Powys-wide pan-Powys organisations which are there, that are already in a position to bring in expertise from a whole range of sources to collaborate on draft policies as they emerge, if we so choose to use them. And they have contributed to online resource that we have, and have a good web presence in their own right. So I just sort of raise that. I'm sure you're familiar with them anyway, but I just raise that there. And something else just came out of that conversation. I'm just going to draw the fire service in, if I may, and they're willing to be drawn in. And you were talking about making sure that we're all aligned around this emergency and change at a leadership level. And of course, the fire service is one of those areas where the climate emergency is driving fundamental change within the service, in the sense that house fires are not the issue they once were. And from my position on the side, it appears that much of the work of the fire service is now grass fires, which are driven by mischief but climate change, and flooding resilience and responsiveness. So I'd be really interested to hear any thoughts that there might be around fundamental service change to shift in this area. So I'll just draw you in if I can.
Can indeed. Thanks, Chair. The risk is that I could spend the afternoon speaking about
No,
this.
don't do that.
I'm sure you wouldn't want me to. But yeah, you're absolutely right in terms of focus. And that's why we've, in terms of our long-term planning, have taken a little bit of a different direction now with a longer-term view through a community risk management plan. And we're working through the phases of that. And what happened over the summer with us, what we are, because funny enough, Catherine speaking about engagement earlier on, in terms of an approach to engagement, in terms of how we make our decisions going forward as an organisation, rather than just sort of a paper coming to the board with a few options on it, authored by one or two individuals, that we now embark on what we call balanced rooms. And we run our first balanced room, which is a balance of diversity of thought into that room, from a cross-section of not just the organisation, but beyond the organisation. We ran our first one over the summer on wildfire. And the question going into that balanced room is, what do we need to be doing about wildfire, not just as our organisation, but as society going forward. And we had around 35 people there from within the service and outside the service. Some people travelled from Yorkshire, I believe, down to participate in this balanced room. And the long list of options comes out through it. Everything's on the table at that point, and then you start channeling down to what can be realistic means of going forward. So our response in terms of the fire is a last resort, really. You know, if we're responding to fires on it, where have the preventative aspects gone wrong, with the regulatory issues, legal issues that could be needing to be changed to influence how we deal with wildfires in society. And we think about sustainable farming scheme, grazing, cutting of fire breaks, all these sorts of things that are over and above maybe a response to just putting the fires out. So yeah, it's a different approach we're taking, and linked to that climate change aspect. You're absolutely right. The next one we programmed is flooding, because just from a response point of view for us, they don't happen at the same time, you know. So we can prepare our work in terms of a wildfire season, and more often than not, the flooding comes later, albeit with a bit of an overlap the other day. But yeah, a change of focus in the longer term. It's not going to happen overnight for us, but we have to start thinking in the longer term. And we don't do it very well. I don't think we do it very well as a sector, as a fire sector, but I don't think we do it very well as public sector either, because we do our bit, we put our plans in place, but we don't hand that baton over very well. We want to see things finished ourselves, whereas sometimes we've got to accept, look, I can start this journey, I won't be the one that finishes it, somebody else is going to have to finish it. So But we're absolutely on that page in terms of climate change, yeah.
Thank you very much. And I wasn't sort of trying to just say, bat it off and say it was your issue. It's a collective issue, but it's, you know, it's one where we're seeing really visible change within service structures, and we all need to be ready to play our part in that, don't we? Are there any other questions of Liz? And then, Liz, I'm going to perhaps ask you or anyone else to suggest how we might deal with the funding conundrum. So any other questions or suggestions for Liz? No? Well, back to you, Liz, really. Do you have some thoughts about what we need to do as senior leaders here to look at the funding conundrum? Have you got irons in the fire already with other bids?
Yes, and I will reply to that, but can I just very briefly come back on the kind of the fire and public coordination on that? I think that's exactly right, isn't it? That we need to get better at coordinating across public bodies, because we need to do the preventative work, and we need to be extremely tight when there is a wildfire or a flood. And the purpose of this meeting, in-person meeting that we're convening, that we're really hoping that you as senior leaders will take part in with Derek Walker, is to make sure that we have, from the top of the organisations, proper coordination and oversight of what are the issues and what do we need to do better. And we know we're not getting it right. There was a fire the other week, wasn't there, in Llangattock, and you know, I know really big problems about not having the right data and not the right people in the room. And you know, I know as a National Park Authority we've struggled to get the data about where fires have happened before, so that we can plan the preventative measures. We just don't, that data sharing isn't in place and isn't working properly. And so there are things like that we need to get to grips with in a, you know, kind of collegiate way, and just have those conversations at the top of the organisations. And you know, we know that these are multiple layers. It's a huge health issue, and it's a huge issue to our natural carbon stocks, and our wildlife sites and everything. So very much urge you to kind of look out for that. That calendar invite should have reached you, and hope that you'll prioritise that. And we're also asking you to recommend who in your organisation should be part of a sort of an officer tier to have those conversations, to prepare for that as well. So, and then on to the funding. So we really have relied on the Shared Prosperity Fund supporting this work, and we've looked at all sorts of different options. Problem is that, you know, things like lottery funding can be quite big sums of money, but they won't support what is deemed to be core public sector work. So you know, we're absolutely looking at funding for projects within this stream of work, and you know, we're actively looking, for example, at a community lottery bid on food, and Chloe's part of that conversation. And we've got this Welsh Local Government Association bid. We're hoping to get £30,000 project out of that. We don't have realistic other sources of money to give some sort of core staffing, support some core staffing to continue on this. And I think the future of SPF is uncertain, but I'm sure people in this room have got greater insights than I have about what might happen next in that space.
Thank you very much, Liz, and I think we'll carry on with the art of the possible, because there's much to be done here. And I've just added the 15th of November, Saturday in Knighton, to my diary to join you there for that event too. So if there's nothing more, then we'll say thanks to Liz, and we'll is it Meredith and Tracy? Is Tracy on the call? I've got Tracy down as a co-author here, and then Chloe, I think you've got a paper as well, as we try and look at the whole systems approach to healthy weight. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Tracy's on leave, so unable to be with us today. And I think she would normally sort of join us for this update, and welcome Chloe as well. So in terms of the update, the format is out per normal in terms of progress. It is a whole systems approach to healthy weight. The focus is on sort of the under 5 sort of age group, but also access to healthy foods as well, bearing in mind obviously the family approach. Breastfeeding, as everybody is aware, is a sort of a priority in terms of trying to change social norms and creating supportive environments for breastfeeding. And the Breastfeeding Welcome scheme was launched last August now, and it has had a really positive response from businesses across sort of Powys, with over 320 businesses that have signed up there to provide a supportive environment. And in a previous meeting, we did show a brief film there as well. And my thanks also to the organisations here today who have been continued to promote that across the county. So just sort of an ask really as well. I think in a previous meeting we did highlight if anybody wants support with breastfeeding policies within the organisations. Fiona Valentine within the team is happy there to support organisations with developing those sort of policies, and equally happy to share the Health Board's breastfeeding policy as well. And then to highlight the Health Board children's team have achieved stage 1 of the UNICEF Baby Friendly initiative in July and are currently working towards stage 2 of that as well. And then in terms of access to sort of healthy food and promotion then of healthy snacks, one of the systems that we are rolling out is access to healthy schools in settings, and particularly preschool settings and nurseries and so forth really. And dietetics are involved in this as well in terms of standards within preschool sort of settings, and 9 now have achieved that award, but we have got more working towards that award. And what I'd really like to see now is an increase of people completing those standards in order to have that sort of award, so we roll it out element. I sort of previously, before coming to this meeting, I was in a RPB exec planning group across the voluntary sector, local authority and sort of health. And there's that work, isn't there, really, of joining up the priorities between the PSB and the RPB. And you know, we've got a really proactive Start Well group under the RPB. But I did highlight in some of those forthcoming projects that are coming through for next year that childhood obesity is a priority for Powys under the PSB, but it's a priority for us as a systems element. And we have got over 20% of children at age 4 who are overweight or obese, really. That's like 1 in 5. It was higher, but it started to come down. So I was expecting that to be becoming a priority in the RPB, and how everybody's working towards that and not just a PSB issues element. So just to highlight that. And then affordability of healthy foods here, and Chloe and the team are doing great work under Boyd's sort of Powys Food as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Chloe. Welcome, Chloe, and thanks for joining us really. So you're going to describe some of that work that's going on in terms of how do we promote access to healthy foods, and how do we link that through to some of our settings as well. So over to you, Chloe.
Just before you do that, could I just ask whether there are any examples? I mean, clearly Derek Walker is focusing on food, and quite rightly so, but are there any examples of any health board in the UK or around the world that is actually turning round the obesity problem that we face, but all focusing on it? Is anyone actually achieving it?
Yeah, so in terms of Powys, when this became a priority, it was 29%, 2019, so we're down to about 22-23% now. So it can be done. A success would be to stabilise as well, that it hasn't not continuing to go up really. One thing we have to remember is this is impact in the first 4 years of a baby's life, so it can be done, but it does need a systems approach element really, and also broader systems as well in terms of looking at our planning frameworks, our fast food outlets, and you know, not just education. It has to be wider than that, because we live in a society really that eating unhealthy food and access to fast food etc. is far easier environment really, and we are a product also of the environment we live in. So it does need a wider systems approach.
Yeah. So if I read between the lines, no one's actually really done this or doing it well, turned it around. I mean, you're saying, well, we're not quite stabilizing it. We've seen a slight reduction, but so do we need to look wider, or we just crack on with what we're doing?
Yeah, so we need to look wider in terms of our planning frameworks. That is a local action. We have raised a bit of work nationally to look at what are the planning frameworks in Wales, which are slightly different to England. And you might have seen in terms of neighbouring health boards who do raise sometimes objections to fast food sort of outlets, but the planning framework doesn't always allow that. So examples of that would be McDonald's within X distance of a secondary schools, for instance, and then what are the policies of schools about children leaving the school site at lunchtime, etc. So that is the obesogenic environment element, really. So we are having success in terms of the rates coming down in Powys, but I think we still need to think about wider work in terms of systems element, really, that we can do through the PSB as well.
Thank you very much. And sorry, Chloe, to delay you. I know you've got some slides you want to show.
No, that's great. Thank you very much for letting me come and have a chat to people today. So hopefully my slide sharing is going to be as seamless as Liz's was. Here we go. So yeah, I'm taking the opportunity today really to talk a bit about Boyd Powys Food and what we do as a partnership across Powys. So really great to come and have a chat to everybody here at the Public Service Board. Obviously, I was invited by the whole system approach team to talk particularly about one project, so I will focus on that a little bit more, but we do have lots of exciting things that we do. Just to start off, I suppose, if I get my cat out the way, an introduction to food partnerships. Every local authority in Wales has received funding for a sustainable food partnership. So that's a coordinator to undertake the activity and kind of facilitate the activity, but it is very much a partnership. And in Powys, that's something we're really proud of, that we work really well as. It's such a broad area, and we have a really strong steering group with the health board, the county council, third sector organisations and everybody on it. So it does work really well to get action on the ground. So hopefully this will be quite exciting to see some of the things that have already happened. The partnership itself didn't start until 2022. Funding was received initially for just one coordinator for Powys. It was soon realised that actually that wasn't enough really to cover the whole vast area that Powys is, and so we're the only local authority to receive 2 pots of funding for food partnerships. So we have a coordinator for North Powys and one for South Powys. The first activity really of the partnership was to go out and undertake engagement and hear from the people across the area. Obviously there was a focus on North Powys because that's where the funding initially was received for, but we did manage to speak to people across the whole area. And that culminated in a food summit where we brought interested parties together to, I suppose, feedback what we'd heard from them. Did we get this right? And develop a vision, a strategy and an action plan for food across Powys. And the vision that came out of that for Powys was good food for Powys, where local, sustainable and healthy food supports communities, its people and the environment. And that's really driving all of our activity as a partnership now. So we've got our action plan, which has got 46 actions, 21 different partners have signed up to help achieve these actions. And the stuff that I'll talk to you about today is none of it is something that that I have done as a coordinator. It's all things that we've done as a partnership and that we can help to build and amplify impact on across the whole area. Just to go kind of back a step as well to let you know that the steering group, the partnership for Boyd Powys Food, includes, I mentioned the County Council and Health Board. We've also got Black Mountains College, Neathcote Talbot Colleges, NRW, Bannow-Craniog. So we've got members from there as well, Social Farms and Gardens, our Food 1200 and Mac Mythlon as well. So we've got public, private, third sector all represented in there doing different bits and pieces. So it all sort of integrates really well. Just a brief example of some of the things that the partnership and partners have worked on. Some of them you might know about. The Future Farms project was where a county farm up near Newtown has been converted into horticulture units, and we've got 3 new growers on there, trialling the new planning guidance that allows dwellings on horticulture sites. and is a really exciting example of what can be done when people work together to achieve things. So that's now kind of, up and running. There's still a few snags, but the growers up there are selling veg boxes to the local community, and they're part of the project I'm going to talk about in a moment, but they're inviting people onto their land for events. It's a very community focused and positive example of what can be done. There's also a future food project that we did with the National Park, so Liz was involved in this as well, and Powys Food provided some funding to the National Park to create a time travel experience, really exciting immersive experience where children or students from Crickhowell High School Year 8 students went through this time travel experience. They looked at the past food system around the 1930s, 1940s. They then looked at the present food system, and then they designed with a videographer their vision of the future and what they want to achieve. They then invited policymakers to come, and the children took the policymakers through the past, the present and the future, or their vision of the future, and they could discuss what they wanted it to look like and what needed to happen at a policy level. It was really powerful. It was kind of a pilot to see what could be done, but Liz mentioned we're looking at a project where we can build that with other partners like Sides of Wales into a project that could go across Powys to try and create and empower our young people and support positive decision making for the future that they want to see. We've recently launched our Powys Food Map, which details things like where you can get emergency food provision, where there are community gardens and growing aspects, where there's local food providers, and when there are food events across an area. This is really helpful strategically for us to see where there are food deserts and where there are communities that are doing some really great stuff that all integrates together, and how we can link up the different parts of the food system. So, for example, if you've got a community fridge that's struggling for supply, and then you've got an allotment site or community garden, could they link up and the food go from surplus from the growing go into the food bank or the community fridge, that sort of thing. We've received funding from Brilliant Basics with Powys Council to do Powys food trails, and this is about promoting those local food producers that kind of the backbone of a lot of what happens in Powys and our economy. So promoting it as a tourist attraction, people can come and they can do the Powys food trails. There's already one in Montgomery. We're developing one in Brecon and Welshpool, and we hope to do some more across the whole area, and people can tick off these different places they visited, experience some of the amazing food that makes Powys, so incredible, and the stuff that we can produce in the area, and help support those food producers with an additional sort of market. And then we're doing emergency food work to identify various intervention points where we can help support people, avoid them getting to the point of food crisis. Food banks, obviously, everyone knows, a bit of the pressures on them are incredibly high, reduced donations, but increased need. So we're trying to identify what else you could do in there in terms of advice and support for the people who are currently using them. Those are like a really quick run through of some examples of the broad range of different activities we do as a food partnership, or that we get involved in or we support. The specific projects that we're working with and the whole system approach to healthy weight feeds into really well here is it starts with food. So this is a really short timescale project. We managed to get some funding at the beginning of the summer and we got it confirmed in the summer holiday period. And the idea behind it really is to support families who are on lower incomes to access local veg boxes, and it comes with cooking classes and free shared meals. So the cooking classes and the meals are all provided free. The veg boxes are subsidised, so a £10 veg box is subsidised by £5.75, so families would pay £4.25, which is the value of a Healthy Start card. So if you're a family on a Healthy Start card, you would get a free veg box. And one of the things identified with the whole system approach to healthy weight was the fact that Healthy Start cards can be used, it's very hard to monitor what they're being used for. We can encourage families to use them for fresh produce, fruit and vegetables, and couple that with cooking classes so they know how to use them. Then we could be creating a more resilient system for the future. Also, the idea, obviously, we didn't really want to be offering free veg boxes because there is a value to food, and we want to make sure that people realise that as they're going along. So that was the sort of thinking behind the project. The growers up at the Sarn farm are part of the pilot up in Newtown, and we've got a grower in Brecon who's doing the same there. The project itself started in September, beginning of this month, and we've got a project officer who's working on it, so it's just sort of starting to get going. But I wanted to stress again that this is it's only really possible because of the partnership that we can build through Powys Food. So like Powys County Council's health protection team are providing the cooking classes. Powys Teaching Health Board, dietetics have done the recipe cards to make sure they're all nutritionally balanced. Obviously, the Flying Start settings are providing that relationship with the families, and then the local growers are providing the veg boxes and doing that delivery and helping build that relationship. And so we just facilitate that bit. We don't actually go in and do the activities, but we are able to bring all these different partners together to sort of make it all work. Now, before I move on, I wondered if this is an appropriate point. I've got a couple more slides, but as this was the particular thing people wanted to talk about here, did anyone want to ask any questions on this before I move on?
Gavin?
Yeah, not a question as such. Well, I suppose it is in terms of how much you talked about, different local authority areas having a similar funding. So just trying to understand what dialogue, whether you work as a sort of a, cross local authority area in terms of sharing experience. I attended a food resilience session for Ceredigion. I can't remember if it was last week or week before. Which clearly is relevant for Powys in terms of resilience, local resilience forum. I think they're looking at developing a local food resilience strategy, which I'm sure is probably more focused in terms of the footprint there in terms of Ceredigion, but there's a lot of relevant stuff there on a Dyfed Powys footprint as well. So just trying to understand how much dialogue you've got across the different food partnerships.
Yeah, it's great to actually be able to talk about that a bit more. So each of the food partnerships are funded, and each local authority chooses to do different things with that. Some local authorities will keep it in-house and will employ a food partnership coordinator there. Some of them go out to third sector organisations like we have in Powys, and others will go out to like the health board, or there's some hosted in like the Planet or different organisations. But we're all kind of brought together and supported in a policy and advocacy sense by Food Sense Wales. So they bring us together. We have communities of practice on a regular basis where we can just have an informal chat, what's happening, what's going on. And those are really great. They have an annual food partnerships conference each year, which allow us to sort of bring together and build those relationships. And Food Sense Wales also have that event at the Royal Welsh where everyone's invited to come and see their stand and things. So it is good communications general across Wales, sorry. But specifically on the food resilience bit, I'm going to talk a bit more about it in a second, but we are working, there's two sort of partnerships that Powys are involved in quite strongly as a food partnership. So one of them is the Marches Forward partnership. So we're working with Monmouthshire, Herefordshire, Shropshire, Powys, and we've just got through the expression of interest stage to put in a big Marches application to the lottery, which is very exciting. And then we're working, so Powys is actually leading the resilience work with Ceredigion, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire. None of the others felt they had the capacity to do it, so we've said that we'll lead on that. But that is my next slide, so I will talk about that in a moment. So I'm really glad that the information is getting out there already, which is good.
So, Chloe, we've also received funding for cross-border work in particular, haven't we, with Carmarthenshire? So we put in joint bids, and there was some of that money that came forward to assist with the SAN project. So there's quite a lot of collaboration, Gavin. They could see that actually by supporting us in that, they would have some residual resource to go back into Carmarthenshire. So I think that's right, isn't it, Chloe, that we're actually jointly putting bids in? Yeah,
absolutely. It makes the whole system work better when we can all collaborate.
Thank you. I'll bring Meredith in now, but Gavin, I have a question and a proposition for you before we go today on this.
Yeah.
Go for it. Sorry.
Carry on, Meredith.
Is that all right? Yeah, thank you. You can say Chloe's doing absolutely superb work, and is that systems approach, isn't it, bringing everybody together? So this fits in then in terms of the whole systems approach. In the Flying Start areas are our most, Flying Start runs from most deprived sort of areas of Powys, so we're targeting the right sort of groups element there. And then we've know previously from the Healthy Start scheme, which as Chloe's mentioned, we can't track where they're used element really, and they're sort of cards really that individuals have in order to access healthy food. So that would be eligibility would be people around low income. So by bringing this together around a Flying Start scheme, it also makes it easier for individuals also in terms of access. They come into the Flying Start sort of setting as part of the support around early years. They're able then to pick up sort of vegetables, and then we've also sort of unearthed around that skill set around cooking as well that people need support for. So wrapping, for those individuals who want to access that, then they'll be using the vegetables available to develop skills around cooking as well. So it is a really good sort of scheme, and as Chloe mentioned, really it is a pilot that will be evaluated as well, but all credit to all the organisations involved there. And thank you, Chloe.
Yeah, thanks
for that then. So Chloe, whilst you're prepping your next two slides, I'm just going to pose this question to Gavin to think about, and he can come back afterwards. So Gavin, one of the things that we've done in Powys is to change the planning policy system to be far more supportive of nature-friendly, small-scale agricultural holdings, so horticultural holdings. And one of the areas that I think we're potentially missing a trick on with respect to the Natural Resources Wales resource is silviculture and or agroforestry, and there is a whole range of types of agroforestry. So silvo arable, I'm reading from the internet, silvo pasture, infield agroforestry, etc., etc., etc. And I do wonder whether that there's a potential dialogue we could have not too far away from the SAN project to look to see whether there are any opportunities to experiment with that on a parcel of land that's perhaps been clear felled in order to create a bit of a cluster. So I'm just throwing it out there that as we move from monocropping to more diverse ways of joint cropping, we might be able to just give it some thought. So I'd just give it some a thought. Don't come back straight away. And Chloe, off you go.
Thank you. It's in 2 slides, but I just thought at that point it might be good to have a chat. So this is basically what Gavin has very ably introduced us to, in a similar vein to the last project, although for significantly more money. We've bid for this civil food resilience project, which is across the Dyfed-Powys area, so Carmarthenshire, Ceredigion, Powys and Pembrokeshire. And as I said, Powys is leading on this one. The aim is really to start building a civil food resilience strategy, get an action plan in place, and the funding has been used. We launched it today actually to get a consultant in to do a piece of work around looking at the opportunity mapping and building up a resilience plan for the area, and looking at 4 different food shock scenarios. So a short term around things like a power cut, and these are all kind of examples that we can remember. I don't know if you remember, Co-op had a power cut, all of a sudden they had nothing on their shelves in the shop. This is things that could happen quite easily because their ordering system went down. So what would we do in food shocks events if there was a power cut, if there was medium term like COVID, not that long ago, there was no flour on the shelves because everyone wanted to bake bread, and how do we make sure that people can still get food? And longer term, I mean, it's not quite, maybe still some people living memory, but war wasn't that long ago really, where we're having to ration it. And how do you work out, how do we make sure everyone is still fed in a situation like that, because it's such an essential need? And then relating a bit, I suppose, to the sort of the conversations that Liz is having, looking at intermittent shock. So if you have a failed harvest for a year and suddenly we don't have any of a staple product like potatoes, and this affects the global supply chain as well, what do we do? How do we deal with that? How do we build resilience in our system? And the project it's going to be a first really for the UK as far as we're aware. There's obviously lots of work around civil food resilience going on at the moment following the report by Tim Lang about food security, but we've managed to move quite quickly because we already had those partnerships in place, and so we are started to get this on the road now. So yeah, the tender's out. If you're interested, I can send over to share with all of your partners, because the short time scale we need to get. The deadline for the tender applications is the 16th of October, at which point we will be having to choose somebody, award the contract. In addition to that work that's being undertaken by a subcontractor, we're also received capital funding to try and build capacity within our food system in Powys and across the Dyfed-Powys area. So we're providing some funding for machinery rings to enable growers and food producers to diversify without a big initial cost. And in Carmarthenshire, they're using it to put in some storage facilities to make sure that they can store pumpkins, for example, over the winter, so that they've got a longer period of time, extending the season for the different bits of food that they've got available. So all of this project needs to be completed by March. We will be holding a food security summit in March before the pre-election period, hopefully, and presenting all the information. So we'll be inviting the Public Service Board to attend that as well. So we will keep you posted. And then, so the last slide is just to ask everybody to please sign up to our Powys Food Charter. We launched it earlier this year. It's about encouraging people to take individual actions, whether it be growing their own food, shopping in local food producers, outlets, or coming to community food events, anything like that, really. But ultimately for us, this is really valuable because it enables us to speak directly to the people of Powys. We launched it earlier this year. We've got nearly 200 sign-ups already, and we've sent out our first newsletter, which is an annual thing where we just provide an update on what we've achieved over the last year, and it enables people to hold us to account. They've given us this mandate to achieve a vision and these actions. So every year we want to be able to provide an update to them about what we have done and engage them in dialogue around how it's all going. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing. And if have you got any questions?
Thank you very much. And I think we're still on time. Gavin, I didn't know whether you wanted to come back immediately or go away and give it some thought. I'd rather put you on the spot there.
No, that's fine. No, well, welcome that, and happy to explore. I think you mentioned a site. I can't recall what the site was that you were looking at potentially something adjacent.
So the Wern farm that Chloe was talking about was up in the Sarn area. We've got quite a big farm estate, and you do have forestry up in that sort of area, but it could be anywhere, couldn't it? That we took an experimentation.
Happy to explore. Clearly, we manage the Welsh Government Woodland Estate on behalf of Welsh Government in line with the range of different things that they expect from it, but certainly happy to explore that. And and I'm sure that there are some opportunities, and the planning context is one of those potential constraints or enablers. So it would be useful to understand a little bit more in terms of how that looks and how that might enable. So welcome a further conversation on that.
Absolutely. Thank you. We get that as an action, and thank you, Chloe, for that presentation. So we're just about on time. With me babbling away, I've just carried us over our nominal time schedule, but we move now to the other items on the agenda. And item 4 is the draft annual report on page 35 to 96, both the Welsh and English. And Catherine, are you just introducing that? Is that falling to you?
Yes, please. Yes. I'll try and be succinct. So this is the second annual report that we've produced as part of a Fair, Sustainable and Healthy Powys. Over the past year, we have built on the foundations that were laid in 23-24, and some strong progress has been made across all 3 areas. So just to remind people, so we set out looking at people in Powys living happy, healthy and safe lives, being a county of sustainable places and communities, as well as having an effective public service for the people of Powys. So as part of this, we've got our responding to the climate emergency. So Powys is one of the first PSBs to have conducted a systematic climate risk assessment, and that work has informed the development of the Powys Climate Action Plan and has been shaped by robust research and evidence, as well as stakeholder engagement. We have identified and worked on 9 transformational shifts, including sustainable travel, restored nature and joined up public services. In terms of healthy weights and that whole system approach, there has been a real focus on children aged 5 and under, as well as their families and accessing healthy food. But some of the key achievements over the year were that we have, as Mez mentioned earlier, many businesses have signed up to that breastfeeding welcome scheme and are still joining now. They have been awarded a Gold Standard Healthy Snack award, as well as progressing with the Cooking Counts projects that we've seen various videos over the year. Strengthening partnerships with local growers, as well as flying start settings. In terms of evidence and insight, we've strengthened our collaboration and close working with the Regional Partnership Board and improved our data sharing there. 106 updates have been made to our Public Wellbeing Information Bank. We've got an agreed shared co-production principles between ourselves and the Regional Partnership Board, as well as town and community councils being engaged in shaping that climate action plan. So all three areas have had similar challenges in terms of a lack of dedicated funding being one of the sort of key barriers, as well as some constraints around capacity. However, we do continue to embed the Future Generations Sustainable Development Principle. We are thinking long term in terms of the climate action plan and that early years focus. We are preventative through the promotion of healthy eating and climate resilience. We're integrated in terms of bringing the Regional Partnership Board and Public Service Board closer together, collaborative with that strong stakeholder and cross-sector engagement, as well as involvement in terms of our inclusive approaches and digital engagement that we've been exploring. So I'd just like to say thank you as well to the PSB scrutiny for the feedback and challenge that they provided, which could be found on page 90. So whilst we haven't had any formal recommendations of the scrutiny, we have had many sort of questions and areas of potential focus. So we will ensure that they are responded to accordingly. We've also included an executive summary of the report as well, which is on page 95, and this would be published alongside the full report if approved by the board today.
Thank you very much, Catherine. My only question on this was around the scrutiny recommendations. So, or the comments they've made, they are there. They've done that work, and you said they will be responded to. Are the changes that you refer to, the responses, contained within the report as it stands, or do you expect it to be picked up at a later date? Because they raise some interesting points, and I wonder whether you actually needed to modify in order to accommodate.
Conor, I don't know if you wanted to come in here.
Yes, of course. I think in terms of the questions, we probably do need a bit of time to discuss with the sort of individual PSB member organisations, because especially as a lot of the focus of those questions is around the Regional Partnership Board, and obviously Powys County Council and Teaching Health Board are sort of key members of that board. So I think we just need a little bit of time to make sure that we understand where some of these questions are sort of coming from in terms of the wider context, and then so we can form those responses and reply to the scrutiny committee properly. But I don't think they'll have too many sort of consequences in terms of the report itself. I think it is just a case of taking that time to make sure that we have the PSB is comfortable and that we get that agreement from definitely at least the statutory members of the PSB when we respond to those questions.
Could you just, I'm just concerned about the process involved there, because if we publish this having consulted them, noted what they've said, and at this point of consideration said, well, actually, we don't think we need to change anything, we just need to have an offline dialogue. The optics of that aren't necessarily very positive. If I'd have spent my time making comments, I might want to see a greater recognition. So I'm not certain whether I'm entirely comfortable just to sort of press on without making sure that we're entirely happy that there are no changes necessary there. Sorry, Catherine, I'll bring you back if I may.
Yes, thank you. So just to note really, so on page, it starts on page 89, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Some general observations and some sort of compliments, actually, which is positive. But then on page 90, some of the questions. So the questions really related to us moving forward as a group rather than the report, which was looking backwards. So the questions are relating to sort of what we're going to be put in place in the future. So they wouldn't modify anything that's already in the report itself.
Thank you. That's helpful. And can I suggest, therefore, that if we are content to approve both this and the executive summary, we obviously go back and thank the scrutiny for the work that they've done, but ensure that prior to updating next time around, and it's every couple of years, isn't it, that we take back what they said and demonstrate how we'd responded in the interim period. Is that all right? So that they can see actively what we've done in recognition.
We can make a commitment as well. So the responses to these, we could bring them back to our next meeting in December.
Thank you very much. That'd be really helpful. I've got no more to say on that. Does anyone else have any observations on it? I'm looking for hands. No, if you're content, then okay. Yeah, Ewan.
Sorry, I was just going to thank those who have put the report together. I'm not sure who exactly has been working on it, but a lot of work gone into it. There's a lot of content in there. Just thanks on behalf of Midwest Wales Fire Service today. Thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated. Thank you very much, and we'll make a note of that. So I don't think we need to. Do we need to vote on this in any way? Conor, I don't think so, do we? I've got no dissent, so I think it's by agreement.
As long as there's consensus, yeah, that should be fine, Chair.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And then the next item is item 5, which is the terms of reference. Is James Landridge Thomas coming in to present that? As he's the author this time, or is it Conor, you taking it on his behalf?
Thank you, Chair. I should note as well, James Landridge Thomas no longer works for Powys County Council. Sorry, Chair. It's. I think when he was the officer who was sort of responsible for updating the terms of reference. So there are a few names on there, but that wasn't the public domain. So
that passed me by. So sorry.
Sorry. But no, happy to just sort of take this item. It was really only included for this meeting, more for information, just to sort of bring it back to the board's attention, because it has been some time since I think it was 2022 when the terms of reference were last formally reviewed, because the board is required by the Wellbeing Future Generations Act to review its terms of reference at least after the each local government election. So this wouldn't be, the board is completely able to, whenever it wishes to review the terms of reference as it sees fit. But it was more just to include it for information, because it hasn't been sort of put into the public domain for some time, and there was, I think, a little bit of confusion following the last meeting just around sort of who is sort of responsible in terms of voting, and then also sort of that eligibility around sort of like chairing meetings. So it's just to make that clear about who sort of there is that distinction between the sort of statute members, but as a partnership, it also, the terms of reference recognises that there should still always be that consensus view gained from all partners, not just their statutory members. But that was really the reason why we wanted to put it on as an item. And again, might not be necessarily that there is a need to agree any particular changes today, but it was just to raise that. And then again, if we wanted to bring that back, then we could potentially at the next meeting, and this could also be circulated with all PSB members, leads. Just to just have the opportunity to make sure that there's nothing there that needs to change, and it could be things just like job titles for some of the representatives of the PSB organisations, and potentially just making it a little bit clearer as well around that process when there may need to be a new chair elected, because I think this was the first time that the board has had to elect a new chair that doesn't follow sort of the local government cycle, which it obviously has worked fine before. But it was just a slightly, sort of new process to navigate. So that was sort of the rationale for sharing it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think it says in the terms of reference, which I did, being a rather dull fellow, sit down and read before the meeting, that it will be looked at every couple of years in any event. So I think it was timely that it came forward. I couldn't see any track changes, as you say. I think it's here to invite any observations, any changes that are necessary. So if colleagues have got any they wish to raise now, then do so, or if you're quite content to take it away, and we can note any changes that you you make by way of names, titles, etc., in a tracked change version that we can come back with. Otherwise, we'll note it now and move on. Are people content with that? And I'm just looking out for hands or nods. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we'll do that then. So we now move to the AOB, and we do have one item of AOB that I'm been advised of in advance. I think we've got Claire Bryant to take us through the supplemental paper that came around in relation to the police and crime update. So Claire, welcome to the meeting. The floor is yours. I've said that. Is Claire in the meeting?
I am
Oh, there we
sorry.
are. Sorry, you weren't on my screen.
I went to share my screen and then I blocked off my mute button. So bear with me 1 second. There's some tech challenge there. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Claire Bryant. I'm the Head of Strategy and Policy in the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. And this is a bit of a roll-in presentation. We've been going around each of the public service boards to provide an update on what feels like a long time ago for myself now is the police and crime plan that we launched. He must be back before the summer for sure, around May time. So just to give you a potted background of it, can everybody see my screen? Okay, is that clear? Yeah. Okay, so it's a legal duty for the Police and Crime Commissioner to publish a police and crime plan within the first year of their appointment. So they're usually appointed or elected, sorry, in the May. So they have to produce the new police and crime plan by the end of the following March. So just under a year to deliver. This is David Llewellyn's third police and crime plan. And we've taken a similar approach to the previous iteration, really, in terms of how we gathered the relevant information and consulted, etc. So I won't go through the list there, but it's just a bit of a background as to what is considered before we move into developing the new police and crime plan. And this is a kind of structural representation of what is in the plan. So the vision is now around improving trust and confidence, which I'm sure won't be a big surprise to anybody with the activity that's been in the news over the recent years, has really had an impact across policing, not just centred on those forces that have been the main points of focus in the news articles, but it'd be naive to think that what's happened in the Met in particular hasn't impacted locally as well. So that is an absolute focus for us. And then underneath it, we flipped around the plan this time, rather than having priorities first and then the kind of supplementary ways of working sitting at the back of that. What we've done is put those to the fore, and actually that middle structure there around partnership working, governance, sustainability, etc. That is what drives the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner's activity. And then the specific priorities underneath around victims, prevention and justice are what the specific areas that we're asking the force partners and ourselves to contribute to collectively. So just to give you an overview of each segment then, the overall vision is focused around protecting people and seeking justice, perceptions of fairness and doing what we say we do, ensuring everybody can feed into our activities and that we're representative and promoting equal opportunity. So really all encompassing, but focused under the banner of improving trust and confidence. Then each of the priorities under the victim, so that you'll notice, those of you who have read previous police and crime plans, there's not a significant difference in the themes that we're working under, because with having the same commissioner coming through again for his third term, we were really clear that the plan actually that we had was relatively fit for purpose in terms of the priorities of victims prevention and criminal justice. but what we've done is maybe added a little bit of emphasis on some of the extra elements. So supporting victims was the focus last time. We're now moving more into the prevention space. Not that that wasn't happening previously, but just being more overt in that. And introducing procedural justice and capturing more around victims' rights, victims' feedback, and that is driving improvements in services to victims. It's also about improving their participation. So we've got really active victim survivor networks, engagement opportunities. We link a lot with the Mid and West Wales survivor advisory panel, etc. It's then about the specialist support and safeguarding. So we commission a lot of services for victims and emphasising the links with partners around safeguarding measures. It's about zero tolerance towards violence against women and girls, or VAWDRESV in Wales, and that we're being really clear that that was one of the previous Chief Constable's priorities, and we're really supportive of that continuing. And I've already talked about victim and survivor feedback, and we've had some interesting discussions with victims, especially those of domestic abuse and sexual violence, over recent months and years around the language that we use as well. And that's, you'll see now a move towards victim and survivor, because the word victim doesn't resonate with everybody and isn't it can be a barrier to engagement. So we are starting to use the term survivor more in our work as well. Our second priority then, that was very much focused on safe communities, again a heavy influence on preventing harm. We maintain focused on antisocial behaviour, as the UK government does, and working closely with community safety partnerships on that. Visible and accessible services has always been a priority of the Police and Crime Commissioner, but we're now getting more support and more kind of encouragement nationally that this is a big driver for trust and confidence. Again, it's not a surprise, but it's just having it more I suppose elevating its importance within the police and crime plan. Collaboration around problem solving. Road safety, again, a big issue, especially in Powys. You know, we've had lots of interactions with different community groups and councillors, etc., around road safety issues, and working with partners such as fire to work on road safety initiatives. So continuing that activity. Serious and organised crime will never disappear as a focus. Same with drug diversion and treatment. More emphasis in Wales, isn't there, on the diversion and a public health approach to drugs than criminalisation. And that's something that we're always lobbying the UK government to recognise, that we're less about the punitive approach and more about the prevention and treatment. Prevention of exploitation and protection from retail crime. We've made very little reference to specific crime types through this plan, consciously so, because what we didn't want to do is list all of them, or list some and exclude others and then ask questions, but that we have more strategic things. But in particular, retail crime, again, it's not a specific crime type, but crime against retail workers and assaults, etc., is an area of focus, because it's an area of where there's maybe a lack of confidence amongst the communities. The Commissioner, again, very committed to children, young people and prevention services for those, and I'll talk a little bit more about that after. And then responding to national threats and local issues is maybe where we've got quite a bit of synergy, again, is around, you know, climate emergency responses, the national threats in the strategic policing requirement, etc. And then the third and final priority, again, around justice. This is mainly about the partnerships and the collaboration across the criminal justice system, because the Police and Crime Commissioner's predominant role is to hold the Chief Constable to account for the delivery of efficient and effective services, policing services for the area. But he has a role as well across the criminal justice system in supporting effective justice outcomes. So focus on timeliness. It's another area of issue for trust and confidence. The longer cases take to conclude through the criminal investigation process and then getting through to a justice outcome, it can negatively impact on people's experiences, and we see a lot of victims pulling out of the process the longer it goes on. Linked to that, then, swift and effective justice for the most serious crimes and prioritising those, particularly in the violence against women and girls space. Linked to commissioning activity, then, needs-led interventions to prevent reoffending, so not just focused on support services for victims, but also recognising trauma-informed approaches and preventative measures for offenders, and recognising, you know, their vulnerabilities and needs in ensuring that they don't reoffend. Promoting and protecting children and detainees' rights. You know, the Commissioner has got a statutory duty to have an independent custody visiting scheme, for example, on the back of the Brixton riots many moons ago. And that's a big focus for our office, is making sure that we conduct that effectively, not just do it because we have to do it, but actually that we're enhancing the custody experience. And we've got some initiatives going on again, and recognising that that's an early point, an opportunity of intervention when somebody first comes into police custody. Restorative approaches is something that we're trying to tackle. That's been a theme throughout our police and crime plans, and something that we haven't really gotten on top of is understanding what restorative approaches look like and how we can improve those services. I've mentioned trauma-informed and the focus on working towards a trauma-informed Wales. All of the police force areas and police and crime commissioners' offices are engaged now in how do they become trauma-informed organisations, and it's something that our OPCC in particular are driving forwards. And then women in the justice system as well. You'll have seen maybe in the press there was a recent opening of a women's justice centre. Or a women's centre, sorry, for women involved in the justice process. So there's a continuation of that, and, you know, consideration of whether that we need more centres such as this to recognise the differing needs of women that are coming into contact. So that's a kind of real whistle-stop tour of the police and crime plan. I'll send around the links as well if you want to look into more detail and so on, and I'm happy to take any questions on the content within. But then I thought it was also useful to give a quick overview of some of our activity behind it then. So another difference, I suppose, from the previous plans is that we now have a really comprehensive performance framework that sits underneath the plan. We haven't published that at this point in time because it's quite an iterative process. It's a huge document. We put it together between our office and Powys Police, and it's growing all the time as we find new measures that are being captured and how we use those effectively. What we don't want to do is put it in the public domain and it confuse people. So over the next year, we're going to be looking at all of this data that we're drawing in and analysing, and the Commissioner using at his quarterly performance meetings, which are public and people can see it that way. We're looking at how can we effectively communicate it to the public so that they get a real understanding of how their force and partners are performing, without bamboozling them with the reams and reams of measures. So what we have now at the Strategic Performance Board, that's what I mentioned, is the quarterly meeting that's available for the public to view. We ask the force and partners through ourselves, through the data that we collect, that we provide a detailed report that covers a core set of data that we see every quarter, and then one out of the four then will have a focus on each of the priorities or an annual roundup for that fourth quarter. So we've just had the annual roundup in July. In our next meeting in early November, that will be focused on priority 2 around preventing harm. So I'm going to rewind a little bit. When we launched the Police and Crime Plan, we invited partners, including Public Service Board members, to an event. We held it down in Trinity, or University of Trinity. I get all confused with the letters, in Carmarthen. And we give a bit of an overview, just like I've just provided you, and then we set out some workshops and we encourage partners to go to the ones that were most relevant to them. So we had those 5 workshops that are on the screen, and then we looked at finding ways of gathering what activities already ongoing and what the future ideas for partners to work collectively on, to try and encourage some of that cross-partner collaboration. And then finally, something that's quite new, a new approach that we're taking within the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. You may have heard previously we undertook deep dives, so thematic reviews of particular topics. We did over the years reviews into the use of force. We looked at the way that the force were tackling serious drug problems. We looked at how they were communicating with the public from the first point of contact, etc. We've now moved on and taken a bit of a select committee approach. Now, you will see this term changing. We've already had some feedback that the select committee approach, the phraseology kind of put some partners off engaging in the process. But we used that as our working title because we were, in effect, reflecting what happens in Westminster and the Senedd around how topics are scrutinised in a kind of round table panel type approach. And the idea is that it's a public, is put on public record, and is a way of the Commissioner inviting, not demanding, but inviting partners and the police service to provide evidence of how they're tackling a particular issue. So far, we're working on our first review, which is listed there, and it's focused around intervention and prevention services for young people, because we were recognising that there's a lot of activity for children, and then there's that transition into adulthood, and it's a bit of a cliff edge for children that come of age and suddenly move into the adult system, and they've got quite unique needs. So there's a focus on that at the moment. We've had one evidence session and we've got another one planned quite shortly. And again, you know, if you're familiar with the Westminster approach to select committees, it's taking that principle of inviting feedback, conducting surveys, asking young people in this example what their experiences are, inviting partners to provide their views and evidence and examples of where they're working really well and their good practice, etc. And then having an opportunity for the Commissioner and a panel of representatives from his volunteer schemes and some of his other of his other scrutiny arrangements to ask questions of and ask people to come in and provide a little bit more detail on some of those activities, with the aim then of getting down to the, you know, answering that exam question. And that's what we're waiting to do. So that's the one we've got at the minute. We've got one launching in the new year, dates to be confirmed, around road safety, and then we intend on the one following that to be focused on rural crime, because they seem to be the hottest topics at the moment that we think we could have an impact in. So apologies, that was a quite a long-winded input, but hopefully has been informative, and I'm happy to take any questions, or if you want to follow up independently, that's fine too.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Claire. I mean, it's a useful canter through some of the work that you're doing, and you know, there's clearly a lot there. What struck me, however, when you were going through that, I know that you're a sort of the Police and Crime Commissioner is a volunteer member of the Public Service Board, not a standing member. We've just been looking at the terms of reference. But when I think of the 3 objectives of the wellbeing plan that we've adopted here in Powys. What strikes me is what you're describing sits over here, quite independent from this here. And what I would like to see is a cross-reference from where you think you're integrating to achieve as another public service body operating in Powys against the 3 objectives that we have, so that we stop the isolation or the segmentation of people's activities. The idea behind a PSB is that what we do is that we have a joint approach, bringing our resources and our ideas together to add value to what we're collectively saying is important in Powys. And it really struck me quite hard when you were going through that it was quite separate. And I want to see what more we can do outside of this meeting to bring that into a more integrated way, so that when we look at our annual report next year, we can say that actually this living well, this being safer, stronger together, etc., looking at our objectives, we can tie in some of that work around, I don't know, road safety or fear of crime into that, rather than having it stand separate. So please don't take it as a criticism. I do thank you for bringing it here. It's really important, but that's what just struck me, and I'm new into this role of that. And I'd welcome any comments that any colleagues have got to make. And if you feel I've been too harsh, then tell me so, please. So
I think it's a very valid point, and I suppose that's one of the challenges. We work across 4 public service boards, so we need to balance all of the priorities really and see how we tie into each of them. Plus, because of the very nature, why we're an invited partner rather than a statutory partner is because we're working as a reserved function, actually, within a devolved environment. So we've got some of the priorities, or the elements of the priorities you will see within our plan are influenced by our UK government and Home Office influences really, and some of the things that we have to include, such as the national threats. And I'm not disagreeing with them, but that's the flavour sometimes in the steer. But absolutely, I suppose there's work to be done in terms of at the detail. I think the plans themselves, it'll be difficult to really align them wholeheartedly, but some of the detail around, for example, around feeling safe and the connection with road safety, for example, we could maybe escalate those or emphasize those rather, about those crossovers.
Yeah, and I'm suggesting at an officer level, really, that I don't know, I'm volunteering Connor now, but somebody would sit down and say, actually, this is really interesting what we've just heard. What can I do to take that away? And then to sense check it and bring it across, so that what we're then hearing is a reflection of those things in our context. Yeah. And I'm sure we can help do that. Sport. I mean, we've got Gavin from Natural Resources, and of course, Gavin, I know you represent more broadly our area, but Natural Resources is a Wales-wide body, so you have sort of a broad range of interests, and you have to try and distill them down to say, actually, in this meeting, we think we can contribute here. Or what we can do, our offices like Connor, is say, actually, we think, Gavin, you're doing some great work over there, and that translates into this work in these areas, and we can showcase it in that way. And so it's a bit of give and take on both sides, I think, to show strength of unity as we come together around the Powys space. So I think that takes all of us, doesn't it, just to look at it with fresh eyes. So any comments? I thank you for that, Claire, and for taking that on the chin. I wasn't meaning to be unkind. So I'm looking for hands. Anybody? Connor.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on that point that you just raised now, and I think there's also I think there's potential, but I think it really needs to be done, as part of that, as we approach the next wellbeing assessment, population needs assessment, and then those 2 documents will then inform, well, at least the PSB, the wellbeing plan. So that's probably at that point, that's when we need to be considering these aspects as part of that wider strategic planning. And again, for our individual organisations as well, doesn't always necessarily have to be. Obviously, there's benefits if it can be done as in partnership through the PSB, but there could be potential synergies as well, as individual organisations.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. It's both of those things. So thank you very much for that then. The next item on the agenda is just the dates and time of future meetings. I think that's the 11th of December that we have there. And then there's the forward plan, which sits at item 8, which is for information, but to be informed as well if there are other things there. We've heard of the event on the 11th of November, and I think was it the 8th of 13th of October or whatever it was with the Derek Walker thing. So we can adjust that accordingly. So we've got all of those things. And then item 9 is the private session, which I'm not entirely familiar with, but do I need to move a privacy notice and close this meeting? Connor, can you advise me, please?
It would be probably worthwhile doing that, Chair. I don't think there's a little bit more sort of scope with these meetings because they're technically separate from the council's formal sort of meeting and business. But I think if members would be in agreement to move into private session now that the sort of substantive items of the public meeting have finished. But and it was just to note that this sort of sustainability updates item was added some time ago, but it was basically just to have some time at the end of the meeting for partners to share really any updates that may not be able to be discussed in the public session if there's business confidentiality or other aspects preventing that. So hopefully that provides some context.
Okay, in which case then I will just close the public session of the PSB today. Thank colleagues and partners for their attendance, participation at today's meeting, and close the meeting. Connor, ask you to stop the recording of the meeting.